Good morning. It's lovely to be here with you all. My name is Lee. I was a Montessori kid. My grandmother taught me to knit when I was 8. I grew up on the Southern California coast, snorkeling and playing in the Pacific, where I found some of my first treasures. I was a crafty kid and made things like this paper soda machine. You could drop a penny in the slot at the top and a tiny paper beverage would fall down the chute because I was operating it from the back. I got to dance in front of a reproduction of a George O'Keeffe painting in 5th grade. That is me top, center, middle. Whenever I would end up in Home Depot with my dad as a kid, I would beeline it to the paint chip aisle and sort of stand there in awe, paying my respects to the color gods. And my favorite movie from childhood was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, especially the scene where he drinks from the daffodil teacup plant. I so very much wanted the real world to work that way. These days, I'm still into unusual teacups and offer teacup consultations in my tea room called Lucky Penny Parlor. And I serve people tea in cups that creatively respond to what's happening for them in their lives right now. If you are a penny on the sidewalk or a bread tab, you're likely to end up in my collection. If you're a snail on the sidewalk, I will mostly leave you alone, but I may kneel down and check out your very cool dashed trail. If you are the sky, I will watch you closely each day and add a stripe to my scarf that matches your colors. And if I'm your substitute teacher, I will have you close your computers and text message each other with alphabet noodles. The text is pretty great. If we're in the same coffee shop and I want to meet you, I might fling an origami frog at you if I'm feeling very bold that day. So I'm going to make some guesses at who's in the room, things that are more or less true for all of us. We want to do work that matters, and we want to feel like we matter. We want to have some agency in the co-creation of our world and of our days. We are dreamers, we have active imaginations, we can see things that don't yet exist and then try to bring them into being. We can get stuck and feel trapped. We need each other to help us see our blind spots and keep perspective. We appreciate reminders, and we all have secret, buried treasure dream projects. So, wonder. What I love about the old Renaissance wonder cabinets, or Wunderkammern, is that they mix things from different categories, human-made things, natural specimens, items from various regions of the world, into one smorgasbord exhibit that basically has the simple title, "Wow, check this out." In his fascinating book about the history of wonder cabinets, Lawrence Weschler says, "For a good century and a half after the discovery of the Americas, Europe's mind was blown. That was the animating spirit behind and the enduring significance of the profusion of Wunderkammern. It wasn't just the artifacts that they displayed, it was how the palpable reality of such artifacts so vastly expanded the territory of the now readily conceivable. So an attention to things and their awesome tangibility opens up new ways of seeing and being, new realities. For me, things are not for owning or possessing. They are to think with, to feel with, to be with, and to become with. A collection is not mere documentation of the past, but potential transformation of the present, and thus the future. This wonderful book displays a collection of objects made during the post-Soviet era when it was difficult to buy anything in Russia, even the basics. On the cover is a TV antenna that someone made out of forks. So this is my favorite one in the book, and the story goes that Grandpa Oleg walks out into the living room, just stirring his tea like usual, and then suddenly, try again. Oh, we got one. And then suddenly, he starts blowing bubbles, and so he had cut a hole in the spoon and turned it into a bubble wand to delight his grandson. And so in the teacup that he was stirring was like soapy water, not actually tea. So what I love about this is that Grandpa Oleg was not just passing time, he was improving time during a tough time. He was transforming the quality of the moment. This morning, I'd like to share with you a process that's treated me very well over the years. It's not always easy to do, but it's very powerful and always promising. For me, thinking like a prism is largely about responding to oh no events, to tough times with curiosity, wonder, and hope. In many ways, being prismatic is about being nimble. So here's a simple example. I was having trouble unlocking my door, so I pushed harder, and the key broke. So the basic steps here are to say to myself, it's okay, to take a few deep breaths, and to think like a prism. In this case, thinking like a prism meant noticing that there wasn't just a broken, useless key in my hand, but there was also a tiny silhouette of a mountain range, a little hidden treasure to delight me. But it's not always so much fun. In this case, I was knitting a tie for a long-distance love. I call this my quantum entanglement tie, and the cable pattern is supposed to mimic our being together, then apart, then together and apart, and being together even when we are apart. But the relationship was a no-go, like before I even finished the tie. So now what? It took me a few years to figure it out, but I turned the tie into the lower edge of a hat. A friendship hat for a dear friend who lives in Los Angeles, so I consider us quantumly entangled too. And whenever we see each other, we can exchange the hat until the next visit. Prismatic thinking can help us see a big, huge no as a yes in disguise, a disappointment as an opportunity. Of course, this gets more difficult to do as the stakes get higher and as the time and energy devoted to a project increase. A couple of years ago, I got a book deal and spent an entire year writing and designing a book about looking for wonder in the midst of everyday life. This was a serious labor of love. I was also the illustrator, and the book was to include a scavenger hunt of 1,000 small wonders to seek out. The manuscript was done and copy edited. I was about halfway through the art when, So my book, which was going to be featured on the cover of my publisher's catalog, totally bombed at the big sales meeting. The salespeople kind of didn't get it, didn't know how to sell it, and basically sent it back to editorial. So they were confused. The biggest comment I heard was they thought it was a kid's book. Wow, what a big bummer. But it's okay. Just take a deep breath and think like a prism. So prisms have refracting surfaces set at angles that separate white light into a spectrum of colors. These faceted glass teardrops bend light, make rainbows, and scatter them about. They are multiplicity factories. One thing goes in, and a beautiful complex array pours out. Is it science? Is it art? Is it magic? Any way you slice it, it's wonderful. And I think it can help us think about how to transform a no into a yes, or perhaps many yeses. Thinking like a prism can split a first emotional reaction into a complex, balanced response. In the case of my Wonder book, my editors and I tried for a few months to kind of figure it out, but it wasn't really happening. My book had evolved at that point. You know, was I making the right book with the wrong publisher? Was it the wrong book altogether? Maybe the right book for the wrong world. So I wasn't sure, so I pushed pause on the whole project, actually withdrew from my book deal and tried to let go. In these situations, I think it helps hugely if we can acknowledge all the good that we've gotten out of a so-called failure and what we've learned, how we've grown. For example, now that I'm working on the book again and rereading the manuscript, I realized that a whole year of writing, I actually became a much better writer by the end, and I actually want to rewrite a bunch of the text because it was such good practice. Another thing that can really help is to get more interesting and nuanced about the no. Maybe the no that I'm feeling is really just a not quite or a not yet. A no is always a particular contextual no, fixed in time and space, not a definitive eternal no. Making things is an ecological process and highly contingent on all sorts of factors beyond our control. As my pal John Muir says, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. It's so tempting to feel like this, especially when things go terribly wrong or fabulously right. But it's just not true. Reality is more like this. And of course, all those other entities are their own yous with their own ways of tugging at the web. So I tried to see my big wonder book no as informational, as an instructive gift. And I think we need to be very clear and careful about the meanings of the no's that we receive. So here's my current thinking. The sales folks thought my book was for kids because it was so playful that they just couldn't imagine it could possibly be for adults. And of course, the irony here is that that's precisely why adults need this book, because they think play is not for them. But if my publisher can't sell the book, we have a problem. So it was time to let go. But not like this. Instead, we can let go like this. Gently and with a childlike sense of wonder and play. We can leave our palms open. So there I was in my studio with hundreds of little paintings and no book deal. So I started using them in my email newsletters. I combined them with some common text messages and released a few sticker packs for text messaging. I pre-released some of the content from my book as a deck of activity cards and sold almost 1,000 decks on Kickstarter. In case you're curious, here's an example. In Gumball Vision, you get a bubblegum ball, and then whatever color you get, you pay special attention to that color the rest of the day, wherever you go. So when the world gives me a no, I like to pretend I'm playing a game and like my opponent just made a wickedly brilliant move and just be like, whoa, nice move, and then resume play with like even more energy, because, you know, maybe the world is discouraging, or maybe it's just keeping me on my toes, and I want to stay in the game. Why? Because it's fun to play. I love how James Carse puts it in this great book. A finite game is played for the purpose of winning, an infinite game for the purpose of continuing the play. Finite players play within boundaries, infinite players play with boundaries. Another way I like to think about this is inviting a no to tea. Pour both of you a cup, ask some mighty fine questions, get curious, be a good, kind host. Explore and observe, pretend there's not quite so much at stake, loosen up. I believe that in order to make rainbows, we must love to make rainbows, which is to say, love the process. Anyway, I think if we're lucky, the only thing waiting for us at the end of each rainbow is the beginning of another rainbow. Sometimes it's just about timing, the when, for the world, for us. As my old pal Georgia says, still, in a way, nobody sees a flower really. It is so small, we haven't time, and to see takes time, like to have a friend takes time. So over time, I began to see the rich array of possibilities that had been hiding in my original Wonder Book. Even the book possibilities split into 2 books. So the kids' book will be published in spring 2022, and it will be an epic scavenger hunt, including bingo boards and stickers. And the book for adults has evolved in the direction of a field guide inspired by beautiful antique ones like this. And I'm in the process of reaching out to publishers for that one. So basically, I took that original scavenger hunt concept and pushed it in 2 different ways, even further in the playful kids direction, and then even further again in the so-called serious grown-up direction, because I realized that a field guide is basically just, you know, a culturally accepted term for a scavenger hunt for adults. So part of what keeps me going is that I'm infinitely curious about the line between the possible and the impossible. I want to know just how much whimsy reality will let me get away with. Can I get adults to play? Where exactly is their limit, and why? I want to know. One day I was thinking about pennies, as I do, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if you could plant a penny and it would grow? So I made it true. I letterpress printed millions of paper coins embedded with seeds. When we want to see new things or see old things in new ways, we can shine light on them. Oftentimes, the most helpful views are hidden, and we don't even know what we're missing. So turning a no into a yes is largely about revealing our assumptions. One day, I noticed a flower petal falling from a tree as I walked by. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the petal start going back up, which didn't make any sense, so I turned to inquire, and indeed, my petal was actually a small butterfly. And I laughed. It's like nature's idea of a practical joke. And I think that if we can delight in being wrong and being mistaken, we are well on our way to seeing new things. For me, it's some curious combo of analysis and intuition. It might be possible to figure these things out through logic, but I think we can also get there through play. These are some of the elements I play with when I make things, and this helps me turn ideas into doable projects, into things that reality will allow or even encourage. So we already talked a lot about when and timing. My wonder book is slowly shaping up. I had to be patient and listen to the ecology of the situation. Let's focus on form with this next example. So about a decade ago, I founded the world's smallest post service. I sewed stripes on an old shirt that I found, a little uniform, and set up my tiny post office around town where I would transcribe letters for passersby. And one of these passersby happened to be an editor at Chronicle Books, Christina, who's here. And not immediately, but 3 years later, we made this together. So people could make their own tiny mail at home. So it sold well enough to go to reprint, awesome. And then the manufacturing costs rose too high, we had to discontinue it. Darn. So I shined light on the situation and tried to think like a prism. I decided to manufacture my own and sell it through my online shop. So yes, it's more expensive. Yes, the market's smaller. My distribution power is very small, but it's worth every penny for the people who it's perfect for, and my margins are actually great because I'm a manufacturer. So was that the end of things with my publisher? Not at all, because nearby was another postal idea in a different form that was much more manufacturing friendly. I thought outside of the tiny box and found this, a keepsake time capsule that facilitates an epistolary correspondence with your future and past selves. And what about tiny mail? I had started doing transcriptions through my website, but I knew in my heart of hearts that the real magic was in the in-person experience, but I was pretty burnt out on setting up my tiny post office around town. So a few months ago, I rented this storefront in downtown Oakland, raised 25 grand on Kickstarter, and my employees and I are creating a brick and mortar tiny postal experience. This is what it looks like today under construction. This is on 15th Street in downtown Oakland. If you peek through the little peepholes, you will see the antique post office counter that I found on Craigslist. It's about 100 years old. We'll be opening later this summer. Here's another example of playing with form. So my friend Lisa Solomon and I designed this fun fabric for a jumpsuit, and it's covered in conversation starters, so strangers feel free to strike up a conversation with you when you're wearing it in public. We submitted our design to a clothes company that we admire, and their reply began with, "Wow, this is really cool," and ended with, "It's not quite a fit for us." So, okay, darn, deep breath, now what? So we can sew ourselves some clothes from the fabric we designed, but we knew we didn't really have the capacity or interest to start a whole clothes company. That felt like way too much. So then, in the meantime, I remembered how strangers are always commenting on my Susan O'Malley bag. Tote bags, of course. It doesn't have to be clothes. So we're gonna do tote bags. So much easier, so much cheaper and accessible. One size fits all. People aren't gonna be returning them because they don't fit. So Lisa and I are gonna pre-sale these on Kickstarter probably later this summer or fall. We can also play with scale. For years, I wanted to build a tea house in my backyard, like a real deal tea house, but I couldn't afford it, and I didn't have any construction skills, and I did not own my backyard. So one Sunday afternoon, I decided to do it anyway, a different way. And I told myself that I had 3 hours to build a makeshift tea house out of junk from my garage. Ready, set, go. And by late afternoon, I was ready for my first guest. And this was possible because I stopped assuming my tea house had to be permanent. I let go of the impossible version to make room for the possible one. I hosted about 20 people over the course of 2 weeks. The rains came, had to quickly take it down. But then I knew I am always only 3 hours away from my tea house. Where? A dear friend was getting married at a campsite in Moab a few years ago in the intense desert heat. And when she asked if I could pick up the wedding cake in Salt Lake City the day before, I was like, oh my, definitely not. That cake is going to be a puddle at the wedding. So what do you get if you assumption hack the idea of a wedding cake in the context of a Moab campsite wedding? You get a cake that isn't baked at all, at least not until the wedding guests disassemble the pieces, which are s'mores ingredients, and carry them over to the campfire. Sometimes new possibilities emerge if we reconsider audience, who a project is for. My newest book came out this spring and contains words of wisdom from everyday objects. But what most people don't know is that this book concept began as a love letter. In fact, an epic fail love letter. But after I wiped my tears and took a deep breath, I found a shiny prism in my palm and shined light on it. So when it comes to thinking like a prism, perhaps you're wondering just how much is possible here. And I think it's hard to say. I won't kid you, it's not infinite, but I do think it is vast. I like to think about it with these two marbles. The earth marble is the given, the bare bones, raw constraints of the world, the part that we don't get to choose. And the swirly marble is what we make of it all and what we do with it. It's the interpretive, creative layer. And together, the two make the world, the future. So there's what the world needs, wants, longs for, or will allow, whether it be now, soon, or maybe someday far in the future. And you might have to teach the world what it truly needs or wants, which of course is not at all easy, but also not out of the question. And then there's what you love to do, what's in your heart and your daydreams, who you wish to be or someday become. And these circles are always evolving and shifting around. The third ring is about what you can do, what you're good at, your skills and talents, who you actually are or could reasonably become. This is your radically unique combination of abilities and experiences. So here in the middle is where some really interesting things happen, and literally happen because they are possible. So how do we know if a given project idea is there in the sweet spot? And I think we can't quite know. What we can do is run experiments and start small. Each project we do or begin is also a question, a curiosity about the world, a dazzling what if that dangles in front of our eyes. From what I can tell, this is at least partially an unruly, chaotic universe that defies our desires for prediction and control. But this is not a reason to give up. This is a reason to dive in deeper than ever to find out what is truly possible here. So I have composed a guided visualization for us all to experiment with today. It's about 5 minutes, so if you're willing, I invite you to close your eyes. In your imagination, browse your notebooks, your files, your daydreams, and choose something awesome but impossible. An idea, something you want to make happen, but don't know quite how. A project, product, practice, a dream, a seed of something. Maybe it's a professional project, a personal one, or somewhere in between. Perhaps you tried the idea, but it didn't work. Maybe you gave up on it a long time ago, or recently. Or maybe it's an idea for the future, something for later on. When you're more ready or have more resources available to you. The idea is close to your heart, but you feel stuck, blocked, even trapped. The idea is mostly an unrealized dream, a fantasy. From the past or for the future, it's definitely not an idea for now. For today, at least that's how it feels, how it seems. So let's pack it up. Imagine your impossible idea as a clay brick, like from a tall, wide brick wall. Hold it in your hands and feel the heaviness. Wrap it in old newspaper and place it into a cardboard box. Seal it up. Add postage stamps. Depending on how you feel about your idea right now, address it to probably never, or maybe someday, or for someone else. Then drop it into a mailbox in your neighborhood. Now walk home. Sit in your coziest spot and rest. Take a deep breath. Drop a tear if that feels right and say to yourself, it's okay. Let go of that impossible, frustrating, beautiful idea as it is. At the same time, acknowledge how the idea has helped you to grow and learn. Think of at least one way you benefited from the idea already, however indirectly. Maybe it led you to meet someone new. Maybe it surfaced an important memory, taught focus or patience. Be fair to your idea and kind to yourself. Suddenly, a knock at the door. You hop up, wipe your tears, and open the door. It's your post person with a package for you and a smile. Special delivery. It looks familiar. You know exactly what it is, of course. The only difference is that there's a big red ink stamp across the front. Return to sender. Your idea is a boomerang. It has come right back to you, as all great ideas do. There's still something there, and you know it. The idea tugs at your heart, at your hands, so you open the package, pull out the bundle of newspaper, and unwrap it. But oh, something's different. The clay brick has transformed into a block of glass. It's rough cut and dull surfaced, but it promises translucence if you're willing to work with it, if you can turn it into a prism. Holding this glass block in your imagination, you become a gem cutter. You will facet a prism as you transform and translate your beloved idea into something that reality will welcome, a doable experiment. Each cut is a new angle, a new view, a fresh bending of light into a rainbow of possibilities. I will walk you through a few slices now, but I invite you to come back here whenever you like. Our time today is limited. Make the first cut diagonally across the center of the glass block while imagining your project idea at a different scale, maybe bigger, smaller, different budget. Now make another cut at a new angle while imagining your idea with a change in duration. Play with the when, with time. What would a one-day version be like? A one-month version? A version for a century from now? The version that only happens on the full moon? The third cut will play with audience. Reconsider who this project is for. Many? One? Maybe just for you? Your family? Strangers? Let's slice again while we play with place. How many different interesting places could hold this project for you and your various possible audiences? Maybe a subway station, a living room, a coffee shop, hotel lobby, or hiking trail? Now adjust the angle one last time and create another facet while imagining your idea made out of different materials than originally planned. Perhaps paper instead of fabric, or vice versa. Maybe it's a video, not a novel, or just a simple phone call. You don't have to love this new form right now. Just practice playing. In the meantime, pause and notice that your prism has been casting rainbows behind you on the walls of your mind. Beautiful spectrums, and more of them with each new cut. The next step is polishing. If you reach back into the imaginary package, you will find a polishing cloth. This is where the Venn diagram comes in. To polish your prism means to carefully consider what is realistic. Despite the fact that reality is a moving target, with that in mind, revisit some of the variations you just revealed in terms of what reality might allow. Pick a side and start polishing. Consider which variation you think the world needs and wants. Now polish another area while you think about which elements or strategies are particularly you-friendly. What possibility most sparks your curiosity and joy? Keep polishing and reflect on which aspects draw on your current capacities and gifts, or ask you to grow in ways you'd like to invest in. Try to think about all of this at once to make your way to the sweet spot in the middle. Let's go like 10 seconds here, and again, you can come back here whenever you like. So your prism is almost ready. If you feel like you have enough to work with in your mind, for the next 10 seconds, try to envision just one small experiment that you could do in order to begin. Now imagine a particular window in your home, one that the sun sometimes streams through. Take your polished prism and hang it there, where it can scatter rainbows on the walls and remind you of all the possibilities. Here, notice the fact that you're not actually making the rainbows. We don't make light. It is the sea we swim in. All the colors of the rainbow, including the 10 million colors that the human eye can distinguish, always already exist right here with us. They're just hiding in all that bright light. We are not rainbow makers, we are gem cutters. We can dream, we can try, we can let go, we can go back to the drawing board and ask great questions. We can experiment and play, we can facet and polish again and again. take a moment, take a breath, and open your eyes. I have just a few more words, but first, now is the moment to open the mystery package, and also open the package inside the package. That is such a good sound. So please enjoy your prisms. And as one last note, you can also look through your prism like an eyepiece. You can try it now. And I think of this as a view into the many future realities that are possible. You know, in hindsight, it always seems like there was only one future before us, as if it were inevitable. And the past may be linear, but I believe the future is not. It is a vast array, a rainbow, a collection of rainbows, a multiplicity, a prism. So think of this as a tiny portal or a sneak peek into the future that we have the great pleasure of co-creating. So thank you.